The morning mist washes over the rural countryside of South Korea. Up and down the coast, the chugging sound of fishermen's boats can be heard as they head out to sea. In the city of Busan, school children leave their homes, headed for a day of learning. In Seoul, the capital, 9 million people are on the way to the office in what is one of East Asia's most powerful cities. And in the middle of Seoul is Myeongdong Cathedral, a symbol of religious freedom for the Catholic community here. But the fight for Catholics and Christians to get to this point has been long and bloody. This is a country with a past of kings and dynasties, a past of persecution and oppression, a fight for religious freedom to the death. "35 miles to the north of Seoul lies one of the most heavily militarized and guarded areas in the world, the border with North Korea. Today, that's what the world knows this region as, North and South Korea. But in the past, this was one country. It was Korea. Let's go back in time to the 17th century. Back then, Korea was an empire under the control of the powerful Chosun dynasty that ruled for 5 centuries. While most of the population lived in poor rural areas, the king lived in a lavish palace surrounded by these beautiful gardens.
We are in the Tradition Palace, so I'd like to share the past of Korea. South Korea has the president and North Korea has the leader. Korea is divided into North and South, but there was the Neo-Confucian dynasty from 1392 to 1910 for more than 5 centuries.
Walking the grounds of the royal palace, you get a sense of the power that these emperors yielded and how important it was for them to maintain that power. They built their empire based on a strong social class structure, placing themselves at the very top.
So at the time, the king thought political order and social class were very, very important to run the dynasty best. Those 3 gates in front of the library were entrances. But the reason why the one in the middle is bigger than the other 2 is that that was the kind of king's gate, royal family only.
Christianity had already begun to spread in neighbouring country China in the 1700s, and during trips to Korea, a number of Jesuit missionaries brought with them philosophical literature and Catholic Church teachings. There were also a number of members of the Korean elite society who recognized that Christianity was driving much of the progress in the Western world, and they were intrigued by how adopting this faith could benefit their country and its people. But there was one problem. The teachings of the Catholic Church were in direct opposition to Confucianism.
It's a very hierarchical society or ideology, and it's based on 5 key relationships. And with the exception of one relationship, they're all hierarchical. For example, man-woman, king, subject, parent, child, etc. But there's one relationship which is one of equality, and it's the one of friends. Now, when the Catholicism came in and people gathered to pray, the interesting thing, the word they used for a believer was kyo-u. Kyo is the the meeting or the gathering place, but u is the one for friendship. So in this new dispensation, this new community, people related to each other as friends. So when they got together to pray, you had the aristocracy and the people at the bottom of society sitting in the same room together, praying, expressing a new relationship of equality to God the Father. In fact, God was called the parent, God our parent. Now, this was actually perceived as so threatening to the Confucian aristocracy. It undermined all the relationships on which the whole society was based, basically the hierarchical ones. So the king decreed, this must be abolished.
The king at the time was Yang Zhou, and in 1758 he officially outlawed Christianity, describing it as an evil practice. Dr. Cho Kwong is the director of the National Institute of Korean History and has been studying the history of Korea for decades.
당시 조선 왕조에서 가장 중요시하던 가치는
In the Chosun dynasty, there was the population and then the ruling class.
충과 효입니다.
It was all about loyalty to the king and filial piety to your parents. So these two values, loyalty and filial piety, were the two most important parts of society. You must listen to your parents and to the king.
임금과 부모의
But the Catholics, they relativized this, the words of kings and parents, and they valued more the word of God.
상대화시킵니다.
The whole ideology of the Catholic Church turned the hierarchy that was in place in Korea at the time upside down. Previously, the king was, in essence, their god. But then this new religion taught people that the one who really reigns is Jesus Christ.
특히 당시 조선 왕조는 세계
The Korean dynasty, similar to other dynasties, was based on a class society.
스테이터스가 중시되던 사회였는데
It valued social status. But the Catholic teachings broke this down. The Catholic Church denounced the class system and said that everyone is equal, everyone is a child of God.
신분제가 유지되고
Now, in a class society, if you call out for equality, it means you want to start a revolution.
이 평등을 주장하는
The Catholic faith teaches us that all men and women are created in the image of God and are equal. For the first time ever, people understood that in the eyes of God, the lowest, poorest person in society, even criminals, were as important as the king. It was an attractive proposition to the people of Korea, and Catholicism started to spread.
우선 평신도들은 한국
The laity, they were the ones who studied catechism and accepted the faith. And also, they were the ones bringing in more Christians. It was the laity who built and sustained the Christian communities.
In an effort to stop the spread of Christianity, the king declared Christians should be pushed to the very bottom of the class structure and ordered that those caught practicing their faith or helping in the spread of the faith be tortured and killed.
중한 것으로 파악을 하게 되니까 충과 효라고
They were seen as just
기본 가치
shameless,
거기는
despicable
그러니까
criminals.
정도로 봤기 때문에
So they would commit executions even outside of the law.
법 외의
This was done either by decapitation or hanging.
이걸한 그 처벌들이
Catholics went into hiding, many fleeing to the mountains.
박해가 일어나면은
When there is persecution, the leaders of the church say to the people that you should run away. Do not go to the officials and turn yourself in, just flee. And the only place they could run to was deep into the forest. So when there was persecution, the Catholics started Christian villages, and that's where they would live and other Christians would come.
As the country had no priests or religious, Christians in hiding studied religious texts smuggled in from China and spread the teachings from one rural village to the next.
산으로 또는 이렇게 피해가서 교우들끼리 모여서 살았습니다. 이게 교우촌이라고.
Many of the faithful, in order to escape from persecution, they went into the countryside and the hills and formed Christian villages. So even when there are desperate times, if you enter into a Christian community or village, you will not starve. The brothers helped each other, they looked after each other.
이것이 그 교촌이라는 것이.
It's the lay people. They sought the gospel themselves. They studied it. They voluntarily accepted the faith, not through a missionary. They believe the teachings of the church that we are all loved by God, that we are one family, and that we are equal. Korean Catholics started to believe this.
이 실제로 한국 교회사에 보자면은
In reality, if you look at the history of the Korean Catholic Church, in order to safeguard their faith, they gave up a life. We call them martyrs.
어느 정도 되느냐면은
How many martyrs were there? We say in general about 20,000 martyrs, but we really don't know the exact number.
하고 생각을 합니다.
The martyrs, those who sacrifice their lives for their faith, are honored in different locations all over Korea. In the middle of Seoul, located just on the Han River, is Joldasun Martyr Shrine and is dedicated to those who gave up their lives during the Byaigyan persecutions of 1866. The name of this location, Joldasun, means Beheading Hill. It is the location where large numbers of Catholics were martyred and their bodies thrown off the cliff into the Han River. And just down the river is another shrine called Sainamteo.
그래서 그 당시에 여기가 모래
At the time, this area was a sandy riverbank and there was a docking area for boats.
그 나루터가 있었어요. 나루터가 있었고
On one side, there was a training area for physical training, and on the other side, there was an execution place. Those who committed high treason were beheaded.
분들을 이렇게 참소하는 곳이었는데
They would behead the Catholics and display the head on a tall lance, so that the people that were passing by would see it.
그 많은 사람들이 오고 가고 하는 데다가
You can see here where the Catholics were dragged by rope. They were caned, they experienced great torture. But despite this, the number of Catholics did not dwindle.
모래사장에다가
The first recorded priest to come into Korea on mission was Father Jacob from China, who came in the 1790s. And while the Korean authorities tried to hunt him down, there are many stories of Korean Catholics claiming that they were Father Jacob, sacrificing their own lives so that he could continue his work of spreading the gospel message. Father Jacob handed himself in and was executed at the now Sainamteo shrine.
엄청난 매로서 이렇게 했었지만
They were in their cells, those two priests, and they encouraged each other. Let's not betray our Lord.
It is said that even parents of small children who were imprisoned because of their faith never turned their backs on the church.
그 엄마 아빠를 동냥을 해가지고 그
So it shows that even though they had children, these parents would rather stay as Catholics and in jail. They really believed in God.
At this stage, almost all Christians had fled this area too and headed for the mountains, where many became potters.
그래 옹기를 굽은 이유가 먹고
The reason why they became potters is firstly for their livelihood. But also, if you are a potter, you can move around and you can evangelize. And within the pottery community, you can form a secret code in your work so you can exchange information. So many Catholics became potters.
했다고 해나 그렇게 했어요.
Taking up the role in society as potters helped them stay under the radar, as in those days, potters were seen as the lowest class of people. It allowed them to move from location to location quietly and practice their faith secretly. They could also communicate with other Catholics by carving secret signs and messages into their clay pots and jars.
일반 백성으로 살아야 된다고 강요를 했던 것이죠.
The aim of the authorities was to make Catholics give up their faith and return back to their regular life. So I think the torture was, in a way, the last chance the authorities gave to save them.
이 당시의 신자들
If they give up this faith, then they could keep their lives, they could live. So the torture was seen as a way to change their hearts. And if I look at the 1860s persecution in Seoul, about 1/3 of the people, despite the worst torture you can imagine, they kept their faith.
지켜나가서 순교를 합니다.
Despite the brutal persecutions of the faithful, Catholicism continued to grow slowly and steadily across Korea, inspired in part by the sacrifices made by so many. One of the rural, harsh mountainous regions that Christians established a secret community in was Baeron, and there today is Baeron Shrine. It's a beautiful day, and our guide is Father Peter Sim, who is a diocesan priest and the pastor in charge of this shrine.
Baeron Shrine is a very important place for the Korean Catholic Church. There are 3 treasures here.
One of these treasures is this cave, which was the hiding place for Alexus Wang Se-young, one of the young leaders in the early Catholic Church in Korea. He hid from the authorities in this cave by concealing the entrance with pottery.
He kept a record of all the things that were happening during the persecution. He really wanted Koreans to reclaim the faith. So he wrote a letter to ask for help in this little cave.
It was while in this cave he wrote a letter on a silk scroll to the Bishop of Beijing in China, pleading for his help to rebuild the Catholic Church in Korea. He had kept a written record of the many persecutions he had witnessed and the lives that had been lost. He included this information in his letter, and he also outlined the political situation in Korea and suggested ways the faithful could be helped. It was a risky move. If the letter was intercepted, it would almost certainly mean death. He sent it regardless.
So Alexa went and prayed and asked for God's help so that the Catholics in Korea may live their faith. He made some suggestions in the letter about how the faithful could be helped, and that's the letter he wanted to send to the bishop in Beijing.
The messenger who carried the letter was apprehended by the authorities and the scroll confiscated. He was arrested for high treason and killed at the age of 27. This is a holy place for Catholics in Korea today, attracting pilgrims from all over the country.
일단 여기 입구에 들어서면 마음이 숙연해지고 어떤 성지로서 여기 참 감흥을 느낀다 그럴까요? 자체적으로 그냥 엄숙한 분위기가 되는 것 같습니다. 마음이 깨끗해진다 그럴까? 그런 분위기가 있습니다.
이 장소에 오면 좀 이제 차분도해지고 살고 있는 생활에서 신앙에 대한 부분을 다시 한번 생각하게 되고 앞으로 이제 더 인생을 살아가는 데 있어서 좀 더 이제 선조들을 배워서 차분하게 이렇게 잘 살아야 되겠다 이런 걸 배우기 위해서 여기 지나갈 때 이제 가끔 한번 들리고.
It's very peaceful and calm place. Actually, I came here twice, and my mind is quite peaceful. I feel peaceful, yeah.
Unfortunately, it wasn't always peaceful here. The remains of St. Joseph's Seminary, the first seminary in Korea, stands at Baeron Shrine. Up until its establishment in 1855, Korean seminarians had to be sent abroad to be educated. The school had 6 seminarians when opened.
1855년서부터 66년까지
1855 to 1866, there was a seminary here. At the time, in the church in Korea, in order to produce a priest, they had to send them to study in Macau in China, which was difficult. So the Paris Foreign Mission Society wanted to open a seminary in Korea. So here, theology and philosophy were taught.
In 1866, just as the first class of seminarians was about to graduate and be ordained, the building was raided by brutal persecutors. 2 priests and 3 seminarians were among those killed. The school was closed and never reopened.
This seminary has been lost, but you can see it in the picture.
The first ever Korean priest to be ordained is Father Andrew Kim Dae-young, and located on the western shore is Solmo Shrine. The word Solmo means hill with pine trees, and it is the location where Father Andrew was born.
김대건 안드레아 신부님이 탄생하신 생가터가 이렇게 복원되어 있는 곳입니다.
This is the birthplace of Father Andrew Kim, perhaps the most important site in Salmo Shrine.
김대건 신부님 집안 사람들이
Here, the relatives of the family of Father Andrew lived for 4 generations.
Saint Andrew was born on the 21st of August 1821 and baptized in 1835 at age 14. The young, enthusiastic Catholic travelled 1,500 miles to study at a seminary in Macau in China and was eventually ordained a priest in Shanghai in 1845.
In order for the Korean church to be established, you needed Korean clergy. Father Andrew Kim was the start of that. He was the human naturalization of this. That's why the Korean Catholic Church loves him and is devoted to him, because he was our first Korean priest.
Close by to his house, there are other dwellings that historians believe Father Andrew's family lived in. It is believed they lived close together because of access to water.
김대건 신부님 집안 사람들이
Here, the relatives of the family of Father Andrew lived for 4 generations. And historians say that they were able to live here because of the water underground.
He returned to Korea where he started to celebrate Holy Mass. But just 1 year after his return, he was arrested, tortured, and at the age of 25, he was beheaded.
근데 신부님께서는 만 25살의 나이.
In 1846, he was martyred. He was executed for high treason. Even his house had to be burned down.
이곳이 김대건 신부님이 살았던 곳이.
After 1906, through the authentication of historical research, it has been verified that he lived here and the government fully restored his house.
Saint Andrew was canonized by Pope John Paul II in Seoul in 1984. In 2014, when Pope Francis visited South Korea, he gathered with young people here to pray at this site. In May 1984, the Catholic Church celebrated 200 years of Catholicism in Korea. As soon as Pope John Paul II landed in the country, he went straight to Joldeson to pay his respects to the martyrs. That year, he also canonized 103 of the Korean martyrs, and Pope Francis would go on to beatify 124 more. The Archbishop of Seoul, Cardinal Nicholas Shoyoung, once said, "The shrines and museums are meant to reawaken and renew the faith of every visitor."
I mean, it's incredible that the reason Christians were persecuted in Korea was because of brotherly love or sisterly love that would actually change society, change the relationships, and bring about a new dispensation.
The Catholic Church in Korea has stood up in the face of persecution, imperialism, national division, war, dictatorship, and brutal oppression. Despite these immense challenges it has faced over the years, the Korean Catholic Church has managed to transform itself from a tiny, marginalized secret community into a highly respected part of Korean society with millions of members.
그 믿음과 삶이 똑같았던 분들입니다.
The martyrs, their faith, and their life corresponded. They practiced what they believed in. Therefore, it is for us to follow the example of martyrs.
순교자들을 본받고 기린다는 것은
And that is to believe in the love of God, and that the faith will be revealed in the love towards our neighbors.